Case-based group discussion. The topic for today's case-based group discussion is short history of proximal muscle weakness. And there will be two moderators for this discussion. Professor Achal Kumar Srivastava, sir, who needs no introduction. Sir is professor at Department of Neurology, AIIMS, New Delhi. Sir has more than 200 publications and book chapters, index abstracts in his credit. His main areas of interest being movement disorders, ataxias, genetics, to name a few. The second moderator for our session will be Professor Manish Modi, sir, Professor, Department of Neurology, PGI, Chandigarh. Sir has received various medals, awards, and fellowships, and has more than 200 publications in his credit. He's a member of several professional bodies, including AEN and IAN. Main areas of interest being tropical neurology, especially CNS infections and geriatric neurology. So, in this discussion, there will be three presenters. Dr. Neeraj Bailani, Assistant Professor, Department of Neurology, PGI, Chandigarh. Sir has special interest in movement disorders, neuroinfections, and neuromuscular disorders, to name a few. And Sir has received multiple national and international publications in peer-reviewed journals. The second presenter will be Dr. Rajveer Singh, Assistant Professor, Department of Neurology, PGI, Chandigarh. Sir has special interest in neurocritical care and stroke and has various national and international publications in his credit. The third presenter we have is Dr. Ayush Agarwal, Assistant Professor in Department of Neurology at AIIMS, New Delhi. Sir has received various awards, including World Stroke Congress Young Scholar Award for World Stroke Congress 2018 and Short-Term Studentship Award, and has numerous articles also in his credit in index journals. So our presenters will be interacting with three brilliant senior residents from both the institutes: Dr. Radha Krishna, 6th semester senior resident, Department of Neurology, AIIMS; Dr. Satish Barki, 6th semester senior resident, Department of Neurology, AIIMS; and Dr. Supriya Saravana, 5th semester senior resident, Department of Neurology, Chandigarh. Let us start the discussion. Over to you, sir, Professor Achal Kumar Srivastava, sir, who will be moderating this session.
Hello.
You're celebrating Diwali or what?
Good evening, sir.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we go to the first presenter. We should not waste time, directly go to the first presenter. So the first presenter is Dr. Neeraj. Dr. Neeraj. Is he there? Dr. Neeraj, are you there? Oh, your voice is not clear, looks like.
It's not audible. Can you hear the next presenter meanwhile?
Okay. So the next presenter is Dr. Rajveer. Is Dr. Rajveer there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, you're yes. I can see you as well. Right. You can start your presentation, and later we will have presentation from Dr. Neeraj. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Okay. So stick to time. You are aware of the timing, so you start. You can
yes,
start.
Yes,
sir.
Okay. Is my slides are visible, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Anu and Dr. Vishnu, for giving me this opportunity. So, without wasting much time, I will move to my case. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. So, we are 54-year female. Was a known case of essential hypertension for last 12 years on regular medication with the oral amlodipine 5 mg per day and well-controlled blood pressure. She presented to us with history of weakness of lower limb for the last 2 years and weakness of upper limb 2 months ago before presenting to us, speech disturbance for 2 months and chewing difficulty for last 1 week. So coming to the presenting complaint, initially she noticed she had difficulty in getting up from sitting position. 2 years ago. It was insidious onset, gradually worsening over 2 years. Initially, it was proximal only, and then around 22 months into the illness, she developed fever for 5 days. There was no localization of fever, and she responded to the fever with the over-the medication, over-the-counter medication. Then, after subsiding of fever, she developed rapid worsening of proximal weakness of lower limbs, right more than left, and there were new onset distal lower limb weakness. When she presented to us, she required 2% support to walk. At the same time, she also developed a distal weakness of right upper limb, and around 15 days later, left upper limb. This week's upper limb weakness was limited to distal musculature only. At the same time, she also complained of slurring of speech for 2 months. She explained it that some of her words are not comprehensible, although there was no stages of any language disturbance, spastic speech, or dystonic speech. And 1 week before presenting to us, she also developed a chewing difficulty. She described it that she had difficulty in making bolus and propel food in the mouth. Apart from this, there was no other cranial deficit, sensory bowel bladder disturbance, no histology of any connective tissue disorder, vasculitis, loss of appetite, loss of weight, or lump anywhere in the body. So, do we have a resident here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what's your anatomical localization for these complaints?
Sir, there is a pure motor asymmetrical quadriparesis.
Yes.
With the bulbar involvement. So the localizations would be NM neuromuscular junction, muscle.
Okay.
Mainly the neuromuscular junction and muscle, sir. The other localization can be radical also, motor radical.
Okay.
And anterior motor, anterior horn cell, other lower.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So, do we have other residents also with us? Sukriya?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you want to add something?
Sir, since it is pure motor, anterior horn cell and radical will be first. Could be multiple peripheral nerve involvement also. But sensory component is not there. That is against it. These two I would like to keep, sir.
Okay. So, what's your differential diagnosis with this localization?
So, since it is slowly progressive over 2 years, first I would like to keep anterior horn cell.
Okay.
Anterior horn cell disease. And second, I would... second, I would... involvement of motor radicals, but however, only pure motor radical involvement for over 2 years is quite unlikely, sir. And third, even if it is multiple peripheral nerve, then also sensory component is not there. So these two are quite unlikely. First, I would like to keep anterior horn cell only, sir. And muscle and neuromuscular junction, I didn't want to consider because there is no history of fatigability and there is no diplopia ptosis. So I don't want to keep neuromuscular junction. And for muscle involvement,
Okay, Sukriya. And Dr. Radha and Dr. Satish, you want to add something?
Sir, it's possibilities of muscle involvement probably.
No, diagnosis. I want differential diagnosis, not localization.
Inflammatory myopathy, sir. Inflammatory myopathy, especially is having proximal lower limb weakness with distal upper limb weakness. So IBM is also a possibility because she also has.
Just give me a diagnosis, differential, name of disease.
Sir, in inflammatory myopathies, it will be.
Okay, inflammatory. Next.
Sure. Along that, also a few times, but the age is not very appropriate. But even dysferlinopathies can have such a feature where they have some, but not at this age, and it's very not common.
Okay. So we move ahead. We keep this differential in mind. So what we should look for? We look in the general physics examination. we should, with these differential, we should have proper head-to-toe examination, like general appearance of the patient, any evidence of pallor, icterus, lymph node, lump, stigmata of CTD, vasculitis, any rash, suggestive of inflammatory myopathies like Gottron papule, heliotrope eruption, poikiloderma, like Charles sign or V sign, calcinous cutaneous. We should take proper blood pressure in all 4 limbs to look for the underlying disease and postural fall and pulse rate for arrhythmia. And we should also take accessory respiratory muscle use. And in the systemic examination, we should look for any lump in the upper abdomen examination, including the hepatosplenomegaly, any evidence of mass lesion, interstitial lung disease, as I said, the respiratory muscle involvement. And we should look for any abnormal heart sound or other features such as cardiomyopathy or arrhythmia. So in our case, general physical examination and per abdomen respiratory CVS examination, it all was unremarkable. So we come to the neurologic examination. Higher mental function examination was absolutely normal. In the cranial nerve examination, from 1st to 11th, all cranial nerve were normal. In the 12th cranial nerve, we have mild symmetrical atrophy of the tongue. Occasional fasciculation, movements were normal. There was there was mild weakness of the tongue musculature. Speech there was placid dysarthria, although it was mild, but it was appreciable. So you look into the center of the tongue, you will see something. So what do you see?
Fasciculations.
Okay, there are fasciculation. So there are fasciculation. Sensory examination was normal. Cerebral examination was normal. And motor system examination, in the bulk, there was mild wasting of the bilateral quadriceps, adductor, and gastrocnemius muscle. There was occasional fasciculation over the both thighs in quadriceps. Coming to the tone, in the upper limb, there was a mild reduced tone in the left upper limb and right lower limb. Coming to the power, in the upper limb, power was around the shoulder was 5/5, around the elbow it was bilaterally 5/5. In the distally right upper limb, there was mild weakness of wrist flexion and finger flexion, and grip was around 90% in upper limb. So upper limb there was only mild distal weakness. Coming to the lower limb, around the hip there was bilaterally power was 4/5, and around the knee joint in the left side power was 4/5, and left it was 2/5, and around the ankle it was 1 to 2/5 bilaterally. The toe grip was weak and there was no fatigability was noted. And coming to the deep tendon reflexes, all deep tendon reflexes were brisk, and Hoffman sign and Wartenberg reflexes were negative, and plantar were mute. So after clinical examination, so what's our differential now?
ALS we can keep as a first differential.
Okay,
because
good.
there are coexistent upper motor neuron and LMN signs in the bulbar as well as.
Anything else?
We have to screen for other secondary causes of ALS, which can be.
They come to the ALS spectrum. Okay.
Yeah.
Then anything else?
The inclusion body myositis can be a possibility because wrist flexors and lower limb asymmetrical involvement.
But brisk reflexes are difficult.
Reflexes are 3+, but Hoffman is negative still. And
yes, but reflexes are definitely brisk all over.
Sir.
Anything else you want to keep? Okay, so okay. So we went ahead with the investigation. We did hemogram, RFT, LFT, CPK, urine analysis, HbA1c, thyroid function test, ANA and ultrasound abdomen, CT chest abdomen, serum electrophoresis. Everything was unremarkable. We did a dedicated cervical spine MRI with whole spine screening. It was also unremarkable. So what next investigation you want to do now to confirm our diagnosis?
Nerve conduction study
and EMG.
Good. So we did NCS and then we did EMG. I will show you EMG first. So on EMG, there was no increase in sessional activity. Then we analyzed for spontaneous activity and we find out this. This was done in vastus lateralis.
Intermittent one fasciculation has come, sir, apart from the routine end plate noise.
Okay, these are okay. So the one more fasciculation.
Another
So there was
fasciculation from the
yes,
fasciculation
there
is long duration and complex looking.
Okay, good. Then we analyze for MUAP. So you see the MUAP. Gain was 200 microvolt per division, and sweep by time was 5 millisecond per division. So what you see?
The MUAPs are long duration, polyphasic, and high amplitude.
Good.
And the
so amplitude was yes.
Piquet like
Okay, so there was polyphasic MUAP. Although this is showing for phases, but we have there were polyphasia was definite there, and MUAP was high amplitude. They were crossing 2000 microvolt. And then we look for interference pattern, and it was done in the right vastus lateralis, which has power of 2/5 on full effort. So we found out this. So what is this?
picket fencing type of
What kind of recruitment is this?
Incomplete.
decreased recruit.
Incomplete recruitment.
Incomplete. Yeah.
So what's your interpretation now for on EMG?
Neurogenic changes are there, sir, with both active denervation and chronic reinnervation. Although fibrillation potentials and positive sharp waves are not there now, according to the new Abazi criteria, fasciculations are also considered to be, taken as a form of active denervation. So.
Okay, good. So, and we also did NCS before EMG, and now I'm showing you the NCS. You look carefully. I'm showing the C maps. So, are you able to visible the values?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what's there?
Upper limb, right ulnar, there is decreased amplitude, sir. And conduction velocity also is decreased, and there is conduction block.
More glaring.
Conduction block between the wrist and below elbow is there.
And lower down, go lower down. In which muscle there are conduction blocks?
Right ulnar.
Left median also.
Right. Good.
Left median also there is conduction block, and even left median.
Right median also showing
almost 50%.
It is 50%. The different guidelines say different. Sometimes say they show 30% should be the cutoff value. Some says should be 50%. So there was conduction block in right side median and left side median.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and in this is the same finding. And in F-wave studies were normal and snaps were normal except non-recordable right side sural, which was likely technical. So, what's your diagnosis now?
MMNCB. MMNCB.
Okay. Do you want to keep ALS also? No.
Because the reflexes were brisk. That is one finding which is still suggesting ALS. But if there is no pathological clonus, or sometimes in anxiety also reflexes can be brisk. So with this conduction block, I think MMCB will be first step.
Okay.
Because it is a treatable cause, that is why we need to consider that. So otherwise, ALS in MMNCB with so much motor conduction block, I would have expected it to have not so much hyperreflexia. Maybe hyporeflexia would have been there. But MMNCB, because it's a treatable condition, we need to treat for that.
And the oddity, one more oddity is the upper limb involvement. It usually starts with upper limb involvement and it will be asymmetrical. Here it started with lower limb proximal symmetrical involvement later on.
But ANSYS is showing upper limb involvement is more than lower limb. Okay. So diagnosis was MMNCB with conduction MMNCB with 12th nerve involvement and hyperreflexia. So if you go by the literature and see the European Federation of Neurology Society and PNS guideline, they mention that there may be brisk reflexes and there may be 12th nerve involvement also. This is last, there may be 12th nerve involvement and there may be breast reflex, but there should not be other human signs. So, and similarly in the American Association of Electrodiagnostic Guideline, they also they give same statement. So our patient fits into the definitive criteria of MMNCB. Okay, this was the case of MMNCB.
Rajveer, yes, wrap up karo. Ho gaya.
Sir, 1 minute. So what are the treatment guideline? It is first line treatment is IVIG 2 gram per kg. There are level A recommendation. If patient should respond, we should stick with the IVIG maintenance dose. Frequency dose of maintenance is guided by the patient response. Some patient need once in a year and some patient need once or twice in a month. And the dose is also variable. Some patient need a full dose, some patient need half dose. Patient, around 20% patient are refractory, and these patients should be trial on other immunosuppressive drugs like cyclophosphamide, cyclosporine, azathioprine, and rituximab. So we manage this patient with IVIG. We give 2 gram per kg over 5 days, and we discuss with the maintenance of IVIG. But patient was not affording, so we started patient oral azathioprine, and patient responded well, and she improved completely, and she's doing well for last 4 years. So my take-home message is simple: keep your differential diagnosis broad, evaluate thoroughly, and immune-mediated neuropathy show good response. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rajveer. So we'll go to the first speaker again. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes. Your voice is clear this time. You can start now. You have some 15-16 minutes, so go fast, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Are my slides visible?
No, sir, not yet, but
they are coming up. Yes, come up. Yes, it is visible and you are audible as well, so you can start.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening. Let's start the case discussion. So we have a 16-year-old male who presented to us with pain followed by weakness of both upper limb and lower limb for last 1.5 months. Rash over face and limbs for last 1.5 months, fever which lasted for 10 days 1 month back. So in the history of present illness, let's see it in a pictorial manner. So in the first week of September 20, he presented with pain, which was in bilateral shoulders, arms, and the thighs, used to occur while playing cricket initially for 2 to 3 days, then progressed and used to occur at rest also, and increasing on routine activities. On the third day of the illness, he developed rash, which was over the face, over the limbs, over the hands, at the interphalangeal joints, and over the knee. For this rash, it was photosensitive, and he took some local treatment, and rash began to subside after that. Along with the rash, he noticed symmetric weakness of both upper limb and lower limb. Initially noticed again while playing cricket, and gradually progressed to involve both upper limb, lower limb, neck, and the trunk, which kept on increasing till presentation to us. On the 10th day of the illness, he developed fever and was tested COVID positive at the nearest center, and he was admitted at a COVID center, and fever subsided in 10 days and he was discharged from there. But his pain, his weakness continued to increase, and again evaluated at a nearest hospital where he was given IV steroids with the possibility. And after the IV steroids, his pain improved, but his weakness continues to progress, and he presented to us in 3rd week of October with the rash and proximal muscle weakness. So my question to the resident Dr. Radhakrishnan, by this history, can you point to a single localization?
Most
If you
likely
want to
localization
pick,
would be muscle, sir.
why?
Because of the symmetric proximal weakness and with the associated rash. Inflammatory
Okay.
myopathies.
Okay, good. We also thought of muscle involvement because of symmetrical proximal weakness and myalgia. So if you are thinking of a muscle disease, then please answer these 6 questions before proceeding further. All questions we ask during history, but we often forget the triggering episodes or myotonia. In every muscle case, please answer these questions retrospectively, even after examining the patient. If you have forgotten, you should answer these. And I will skip this slide. So in our index patient, he was having positive symptoms in form of myalgia and negative symptoms in form of muscle weakness. Age of onset was 17 years. It was subacute progressive weakness without family history, without triggering episodic weakness or myotonia, with systemic features of rash and fever, and he was having limb-girdle pattern with neck and trunk weakness. So with this database, and history of COVID positivity, we first thought of infectious myopathy because COVID can cause rash, even can cause weakness. And second possibility we kept was dermatomyositis. And lower down, we thought of a polyradicular neuropathy in the peri-COVID period. So let's go to the examination of the patient. So on examination, if you can see, the rash was already healing when he presented to us, but there is some erythematous rash over the eyelids, around the eyebrows, over the nasal bridge, and it is involving the nasolabial fold, which is in contrast to the rash of the SLE, which spares the nasolabial fold. And you can see edema of the lips and eyelid. And over the hands, there is a erythematous rash again visible over the proximal interphalangeal joint and distal interphalangeal joint also. Over the metacarpophalangeal joint, the rash has started healing, and there are hypopigmented macules over the metacarpophalangeal joints. And over the knee, this was the maculopapular rash. So this rash, you think this is characteristic of Dr. Satish? This is characteristic of?
These are characteristics of dermatomyositis, sir. Heliotrophic rash, Gottron's papules, and Gottron's.
Okay, good Gottron sign is there, and seems characteristic of dermatomyositis. So on further examination, his tone was decreased, and as we can see, the power was more decreased in the proximal muscles as compared to the distal muscles. So it was a proximal predominant weakness with neck muscle weakness. Neck flexors were more weaker than the extensors, and trunk muscles were also weak. He needed 2% support while walking. His deep tendon reflexes were preserved and plantar flexors, and sensory examination was normal. So after examination, is there any change in diagnosis? Dr. Supriya?
No,
Okay,
sir.
Doctor.
Muscle
Okay.
Just possibility.
First possibility of dermatomyositis.
This will be the first possibility, sir.
Okay, what should we do next?
So it could be viral, it could be dermatomyositis.
So now there is characteristic rash
So
of
first possibility
dermatomyositis.
viral.
Now there is characteristic rash of dermatomyositis. Still you want to keep viral. So what should we do next now?
So
Okay.
blood investigations and electrophysiology.
Okay, so blood investigations, it was showing SGOT more than SGPT elevated. CPK was 21,000. LDH was raised. Urine myoglobin and serum myoglobin was raised, suggestive of rhabdomyolysis. And we did NCS. Sensory connection was normal, and CMAP amplitude was decreased in median and peroneal distribution. In EMG, before going to EMG, Dr. Radhakrishnan, yes, but which of the following is not seen in inflammatory myopathy? Can you pick one?
Fasciculations.
Good, fasciculations are not seen. Very rarely in inclusion body myositis you can see, it can mimic motor neuron disease. Otherwise, they are not seen in inflammatory myopathy. So now in EMG, what do you see in EMG, Dr. Satish?
So PSWs are seen and FIBs are seen, so fibrillation.
Yeah, predominantly PSWs are seen. Good.
And fibrillation potentials also, sir.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the MU piece.
Yes,
Dr. Supriya.
Yes.
What do you see?
Yes, small amplitude MUAPs.
So see there, small amplitude, 458 amplitude, small duration, polyphasic. And again, recruitment was complete in this patient. So this is consistent with our myopathy, the possibility of myopathy. So we did myositis panel and his anti-MI2 beta was positive, rest all were negative. So we diagnosed him as juvenile dermatomyositis. Everything is fitting into this. So what do you think? Do you want to rest this case here? Because again, EULAR criteria and ACR criteria in 2017, they recommend that if a classical rash of dermatomyositis is present, then we may not do biopsy. Okay, so what do you think? We should rest this case here, or there are some red flags? Dr. Radhakrishnan?
Sir, I don't see any red flags in this case for dermatomyositis.
Okay, there are very subtle
I think
red
we
flags.
need to.
Very subtle red flags. So his weakness was progressing despite steroids. If you listen to the history, steroids were given, still his weakness was progressing. Anti-MI2 usually responds well to steroids. It's a mild to moderate form of disease and it should respond well to steroids. And again, rhabdomyolysis and dermatomyositis, we will discuss these one by one. So rhabdomyolysis and dermatomyositis, we could found some case reports, but it's a uncommon manifestation, not very common. Okay, so this patient presented with rhabdomyolysis, although renal functions were normal. Then skin lesions in COVID-19. Again, we thought of, can COVID-19 produce such skin lesions? And we are seeing only COVID myopathy. So we came across this study, 375 patients. Most common skin lesion were maculopapular rash in the COVID, which was sparing the face. They were not involving the face. These are some classical rashes seen in the COVID. None of these patterns were involving the face. So likely the rash was only of dermatomyositis. I will skip this slide because of lack of time. So now we went ahead with the biopsy of this patient. So what do you expect in muscle biopsy of this patient, Dr. Satish? This question can have more than one answer.
Yes, sir. Usually the dermatomyositis biopsy shows a perivesicular atrophy and CD4 cells are predominant and also perivascular inflammatory cells are
good. Perivascular atrophy and perivascular perimysial inflammatory infiltrate is seen.
Yes.
So we did muscle biopsy of this patient. Dr. Supriya, will you try to tell us what you are seeing in this muscle biopsy?
There is some change in the size of the muscle fibers, like some are small.
There is some variation in mild to moderate variation in muscle fiber size.
Yes,
good.
sir.
And next, when we see on high power, there are not much infiltrates, not much these lymphocytes which are infiltrating the muscle, but we are seeing the necrotic fibers and myophagocytosis. This is the myophagocytosis. These are the mononuclear phagocytosis in the muscle. And again on high power, there is perivascular. This is a vessel and perivascular some infiltrates, increase in infiltrates, not characteristic of dermatomyositis. No perivascular atrophy was seen in this muscle biopsy. So therefore, we kept final diagnosis of dermatomyositis with superimposed COVID-19 myositis. Probably the COVID-19 has changed the muscle biopsy findings and the course of the disease. That's why the disease was severe and he was having rhabdomyolysis. So this was the final diagnosis. So there are some questions which still remained unanswered. Has COVID-19 precipitated the autoimmunity leading to dermatomyositis? As viruses are known to switch on the autoimmunity in many of the autoimmune diseases. And again, at the onset, the COVID-19 has made the disease more severe. So how will be the course of the patient? We have to follow in the future. So in the last follow-up, although we gave him IV steroids followed by rituximab, he was improving and his CT chest abdomen was normal for Werpaph for malignancy. PET scan is due. So this take-home message is look for subtle signs deviating from classical presentation. You may get a clue. Treat inflammatory myopathies promptly. Although rare, they can lead to rhabdomyolysis. And COVID-19 can alter the presentation of muscle diseases. So you have to be cautious while interpreting findings in presence of COVID in this COVID era. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good case.
Thank you.
So yeah, good case. Okay, you can log out. I mean, stop sharing the screen. Now I invite the next speaker, Dr. Ayush Agrawal. Are you there, Ayush?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So we are starting the case?
Yes, sir. Whenever
Okay.
I'm told, I'll start, sir.
I'm ready.
Vinay sir, now we are having the case discussion. Debate is on the next session, sir.
Sorry, this is the previous session going on?
The previous session on case discussion. Next session is the debate on myasthenia, which you will be moderating, sir.
What time it will start?
15 minutes maximum. After this
So
case
I'll stay.
After Ayush case
I'll
discussion
stay.
next week.
I'll stay here. Good.
Start, sir.
Okay, Ayush, continue. Hello, Vinay.
Hi, Achal.
चलो ठीक है. Okay, bye.
At the outset, I'd like to thank Padma ma'am, Vivek Lal sir, Vishnu sir, and Anu ma'am for giving me this opportunity. I'd directly go to my case. So, a 56-year-old lady presented to us with complaints of acute onset pain with progressive quadriparesis over the period of 1 month, started in the lower limbs, progressed in 2 weeks' time to involve the upper limbs, and was associated with positive sensory phenomena in the form of paresthesias and burning sensations in the soles. It was also associated with 6 kg weight loss without a concomitant loss of appetite. On examination, she also had anemia and clubbing, and examination also revealed a power of 1/5 in both upper and lower limbs with generalized areflexia and graded pansensory loss up till the level of the knees. On routine investigations, everything was normal apart from the fact that she was anemic with a hemoglobin of 7. ESR and CRP were elevated. CSF analysis was not done outside wherever she was being evaluated and treated. And the nerve conductions done there revealed a decreased CMAP and decreased SNAPs with preserved latencies and conduction velocities, which was suggestive of a sensory motor axonal neuropathy. So, Dr. Sukriya, would you like to tell me what is your localization and diagnosis in this patient?
Yes, sir. Sir, it is subacute onset, upper and lower limbs motor plus sensory.
Yeah.
So, like, first possibility will be peripheral nerves.
Yeah.
And second, so she had, I think she had some burning sensation and paresthesias also.
Yeah.
So probably both small and large fibers are involved along with the motor. That could be my first localization. So
localization is peripheral nerve. So would you like?
Second could be multiple radicular involvement.
Okay.
Could be a second localization, sir.
The probable diagnosis would be?
Sir, other comorbidities? Any comorbidities, sir?
No previous comorbidities. She was hale and hearty. No previous history of diabetes, hypertension, or anything else. First hospitalization in life.
Yes, sir. So, subacute onset polyradiculoneuropathy.
It's an acute onset. The weakness progressed in 2 weeks.
Okay, it's 2 weeks. Sir, then it is acute polyradiculoneuropathy.
Yeah. Okay. So as we've seen, localization in this case, since both sensory and motor involvement was there, leaves us with predominantly 2 possibilities, which is either the radical or the nerve. So the most likely diagnosis, as everybody thinks, is Guillain-Barré syndrome. And the points favoring that diagnosis is an acute onset with an onset to NADR of less than 4 weeks with an ascending type weakness, which is predominantly symmetrical, sensory motor without any bladder involvement with an axonal pattern of weakness. But 2 points against it were both clubbing and weight loss that was seen in this patient. And the probable other differentials also included porphyria infections, vasculitis, a toxic metabolic cause, or a paraneoplastic etiology.
The patient, wherever she was being treated, was diagnosed as an AMSAN variant of GBS and treated with IVIG without any improvement, and was discharged with advice for physiotherapy. Just to touch upon the diagnosis and management of GBS, what we should remember is that apart from the fact that the patient should have a rapidly progressive bilateral weakness of both the arms and the legs, the other obvious causes should always be ruled out. And what are these obvious causes that should be ruled out are from the anterior horn cell up to the muscle. We should always look at all these possible etiologies, starting from the infectious causes like porphyria, diphtheria, CMV, Lyme's disease, as well as tick paralysis, to non-infectious inflammatory etiologies like a vasculitic neuropathy, and muscle and neuromuscular junction if it is a pure motor cause. Post-discharge, the patient developed bouts of severe spasmodic abdominal pain 2 weeks after the discharge, associated with constipation, which is not relieved by parenteral analgesic, and a CT abdomen, as well as an upper gastrointestinal endoscopy were normal. So, Dr. Satish, would you like to make a revised diagnosis in this patient? And
yes, sir. Sir, with a lady, a female patient with pain abdomen and features of acute flaccid paralysis, quadriparesis, porphyria would be high on this, and urine porphobilinogen I would like to do in this case for the first things.
As you're saying, this is exactly what the treating physician also did, and what was favoring for porphyria is that she had abdominal pain, constipation, proximal onset, predominantly motor quadriparesis with anemia and an axonal neuropathy. But usually porphyria is a disease that presents in the second and the third decade, has a descending weakness, starts with the upper limbs usually, does not have areflexia, does not have clubbing, and sensory loss is usually rare. So urine porphyrin levels were also sent for her. Just to touch upon briefly on porphyria, a classical triad is seen of abdominal pain, psychiatric manifestations, and PNS manifestations. But we have to remember that the triad is only seen in 1/3 of the cases. The neuropathy is motor predominant, upper limb onset, and it can progress to quadriparesis with respiratory involvement. It is, however, more common in younger individuals and females. This patient was 56, which is a red flag. I'll skip this slide. Porphyrin levels were negative, and upon persistent questioning, she gave an additional history of consuming alternative medications for dyspepsia for the past 6 months. So, any other diagnostic possibilities, Dr. Radha?
Sir, one other possibility is still vasculitis, probably pan, which can also have abdominal pain, and this anemia, weight loss can be there in vasculitis. So that is one possibility. And alternative drugs sometimes arsenic, thallium, heavy metal poisoning can be there, but so heavy metal screen also can be done.
Right. Arsenic will not. So here the question is neuropathy with pain abdomen.
Yes.
The future diagnosis. You said heavy metal, but which one?
Lead can cause, lead poisoning can cause.
Lead, especially in children, That's correct. Vasculitis will be another differential diagnosis. But I always feel in first episode of GBS, you always think of porphyria, but somebody who comes to you with recurrent pain abdomen and GBS, that's where those who come from Rajasthan and Bikaner, every third guy who will come to casualty in Bikaner will be treated like porphyria rather than pain abdomen. Is that common in that area?
And in PGI also it is very common.
And porphyria still one porphyrin negative may not exclude. So 2 more urine samples for porphyrin I would like to send.
Absolutely right. You have to have a very high index of suspicion. So keep checking it.
Yes.
Please continue.
Thank you, sir. Lead poisoning was suspected, and urine and serum toxic screen was sent, and serum lead levels in this patient came out as 30 microgram per deciliter, with normal levels being less than 25, and all other family members were also screened and were found to be normal. So heavy metal poisoning, a little bit on that. Arsenic and lead poisoning can all cause quadriparesis. As Sir rightly has pointed out, lead poisoning is associated with abdominal pain as well. So arsenic, the points in favor are that it can cause sensory motor quadriparesis with anemia, with weight loss and axonopathy. But there's no history of exposure. Preceding GI symptoms are not there. No history of cardiomyopathy, Mees lines or hyperkeratosis, and no raindrop pigmentation. So arsenic levels.
The classic symptom of arsenic neuropathy is very painful neuropathy. One should remember that.
There. Unlike lead, which
if anybody has seen arsenic neuropathy, you will not forget it. I'll tell you one wonderful case. When I was a resident in PGH Chandigarh, one lady had hemorrhoids, and for which she was given pultis, बोलते हैं ना हिंदी में pultis, some kind of a pack to be applied in the anal region, which contains very heavy amount of arsenic. And within 2 weeks, she developed severe sensory painful neuropathy. So sometimes the arsenic can present in a very weird fashion. So if it is a painful neuropathy, I would consider arsenic. But like in this present case, I would never consider arsenic as a differential diagnosis.
Yes.
Please continue.
So lead poisoning, however, one must remember that usually it is associated with levels more than 50 microgram per deciliter. It is associated with abdominal pain, constipation, anemia, and quadriparesis. However, it is usually upper limb predominant, distal predominant, and does not have associated sensory loss. So at this point of time, the patient presented to us and actually came to the OPD because he was advised chelation therapy with DMSA. So at this point of time, Dr. Satish, what would you like to do?
Well, I would like to re-investigate her for all the mimics of GBS again. As told by Radha, again I would admit her and get her EPS nerve conduction studies to see whether there is any progression or whether there is any different finding which has come up. Then other possibilities, because old lady, I don't know.
Okay. So we admitted this patient and investigated her. And upon investigation, her hemoglobin had improved from 7 to 9 because she had received 2 packed cells in her previous admission. And her general blood picture was microcytic hypochromic. Her ESR was still elevated and her CRP was 175. Her nerve conductions were non-recordable. Previously, her SNAPs and CMAPs were decreased, but now had further deteriorated to being non-recordable. CSF, which was done for the first time, showed 10 cells with a protein which was elevated to 72, glucose being nearly normal, and malignant cells were negative. And urine for porphobilinogen, as Radha had mentioned, was done thrice and was found to be negative. And urine routine surprisingly showed a proteinuria which was 3+, and a 24-hour urine protein showed 1200 milligrams of protein that was being lost. All other HIV, HBS, anti-HCV panel were negative. ANA, ANCA was negative, as well as serum VEGF levels, whole body PET scan were negative. On day 3 of admission, she developed sudden onset dysarthria, and an MR done showed multiple lacunar infarcts in multiple vascular territories. So, Dr. Supriya, what is your final diagnosis in this case?
Sir, it could be an inflammatory vasculitis only, which is causing both systemic as well as CNS and PNS involvement.
Yeah, that is exactly what we found. On ELISA testing, we found that the patient was positive by P-ANCA. We could not do a nerve biopsy because it was refused by the patient. Patient was diagnosed to have microscopic polyangiitis and is responding well to treatment and is under our follow-up. And weight loss, and what was against was that it was very symmetric, very proximal and an ascending pattern. However, one must remember that neuropathy is common and usually seen in pan, Churg-Strauss and microscopic polyangiitis in up to 75 to 85%. And all the following investigations should usually be ordered to have a suspected vasculitic neuropathy.
Ayush, 1 minute. Those who are not speaking, please kindly mute your system, please. Yeah, Ayush, continue.
My take-home message is that one should actively seek and rule out GBS mimics, especially in the presence of red flags. Microscopic polyangiitis can masquerade as GBS, and in the presence of a multi-system involvement, connective tissue disorders and systemic vasculitis should be ruled out. And just the presence of an elevated enzyme or heavy metals in our case should not lead to treatment for the same, as they could be innocent bystanders. And an approach should be followed on the basis of the symptomatology. If a patient has presented with weakness, we should look at anterior horn cell disorders, whereas if somebody has a symmetric weakness, which is pure motor, we should follow in this particular pattern, whereas if it is predominantly motor or has significant sensory symptoms, this is a flowchart that will help. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Satish's help in the presentation, because both of us had worked together in making this. Thank you.
Okay, Ayush, it was a good case. Manish, is Manish there? Manish?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. It was a wonderful
your comments on this case.
It was a really fantastic case, an eye-opener, and quite interesting. And thank you to all the speakers and participants for sticking to time. And I'm sure must be very happy that they will wind up everything by 9 p.m. today. I think I can hand over to.
Can I ask a question?
So that they can start with the next session fast. We are 10 minutes ahead of time now. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure, sir.
So this GBS patient deteriorated. I'm giving a hypothetical situation to reason. This GBS patient deteriorated and required intubation. But while getting intubated, I also observed there is a behavior change. Patient was cranking and abnormal behavior. Would you like to change your diagnosis or look into it? What has gone wrong? Because this is a real-time situation, and we missed the diagnosis. Let me confess this. And later on, we knew, oh my God, this patient was not behaving well, and we ignored it.
Sir, one neuropsychiatric manifestations are common in porphyria.
Okay, no, they won't come when you are sick and quadriplegic. I mean,
and
what is the other differential, which is one should remember in every case of GBS?
Carbon dioxide retention also due to respiratory failure also.
No, AIMS में carbon dioxide retention कर दोगे यार, तुम बेइज्जती हो जाएगी.
Brainstem encephalitis or any brainstem lesions, sir?
Bickerstaff's.
Okay,
Bickerstaff's.
I partly agree, but that's not my case. What else?
Bickerstaff's encephalitis.
Well, same thing. What she said. What else?
Any infective etiology also can be there. Like
okay, you are coming to the point.
HIV or CMV.
HIV coming to with GBS, and then having, okay, fine, okay. You exclude HIV in all patients, so they will be picked up. This is something it will be not easy to diagnose unless you have a suspicion of diagnosis from day one.
And sarcoid also can be there, apart from infective.
Sarcoid presenting as GBS is extremely rare, I think. Extremely rare. Neuropathy is only 5% of neurosarcoid. So it's not a common diagnosis, first of all, otherwise. Neurosarcoid is a common rare disorder, and then neuropathy is the rarest of rare disorder.
Tuberculosis also can present as polyradiculopathy.
Okay.
And
okay, not tuberculosis.
Okay. So what do you all ask in the casualty before admitting the patient?
Rabies also can present.
Dr. Manjari is giving hint. Yes, absolutely.
Rabies also can present like this.
Yes.
रोज पूछते हो और फिर भूल जाते हो ना. एग्जाम में भी यही होता है. रोज पूछोगे, एग्जाम में भूल जाओगे.
So this patient was actually, not behaving well, and you would ignore this symptom that patient का behavior ठीक नहीं है. And later on, when the patient deteriorated, did not improve with anything, and that there were MR changes in the brain, and unfortunately, the diagnosis was made on autopsy. And it was not made during antepartum time. And that turns out to be rabies. So what you call it is a dumb rabies, something like that. Okay, please continue.
Chalo, okay. So I think we should close this session and go to the next session.